Cool. Welcome back, everyone. Before we get started with today's show, it is the end of the year. This will be our last episode, so I want to throw a pitch out there. While free speech is free, protecting it isn't. And FIRE is, of course, a generous sponsor of this show, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. So if you're looking to give to a nonprofit at the end of this year and you care deeply about free speech issues, I'd encourage you to reach into your wallets and send a donation FIRE's way. We're trying to build a free speech army, so to speak, as we explore our expanded mission. So if you're interested in these issues and you care about this podcast, long-time listeners, maybe you're just coming to the show, please consider going to thefire.org/donate to give us your support. Now, let's get on to the show.
Freedom of speech.
Fundamental rights.
Freedom of conscience.
Academic freedom.
Freedom of press.
And the right to listen.
You're listening to So to Speak, the Free Speech Podcast, brought to you by FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression.
Welcome back to So to Speak, the Free Speech Podcast, where every other week we take an uncensored look at the world of free expression through personal stories and candid conversations. I am your host, Nico Perino. The past couple episodes we have talked about things happening in the free speech world off campus, but today I have two of my distinguished colleagues from FIRE's Campus Rights Advocacy Program to talk with me about what is happening on campus. It has been a crazy year. To do that, I've got Zach Greenberg. He's a senior program officer in the Campus Rights Advocacy Program. Zach, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I also have our fearless leader, Alex Morey, previously in the communications department with me, now the director of Campus Rights Advocacy, and both of you have been previous guests on the show. Alex, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So tell me a little bit about this year. My understanding has been a record-setting year for FIRE letters to campus administrations.
We are breaking our letter record to campus administrators this year. I think the previous record was somewhere around 200. We're trending towards 205, 210, just cranking them out and getting them out the door because there are so many things going on still in the campus rights space, even though we expanded to other things here.
Yeah, keeping you guys busy. You were telling me and some of our colleagues off camera that DEI statements and sort of issues surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion have become kind of a trend and become prominent in the work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, what does that mean? They went from 0 to 60. Like a few years ago, we had not heard of these DEI problems where faculty are coming to us saying, to get hired, to get tenure, to get promoted, the administration or my department is telling me that I have to say that I agree with their views on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI.
Do they define what these terms mean?
Frequently, no. I think we all sort of have an understanding of what people are talking about these days when they're talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion. But of course, some of the faculty we talk to are not, they're not just old white guys that hate diversity. We're talking about people who maybe study race or gender discrimination, and they have incredibly nuanced views that maybe don't align with the university, and they don't want to have to change their syllabi. They don't want to have to write a statement about how they're comporting with some administrator's vision of DEI when they have their own vision of DEI. So that has seen a huge spike this year.
Do you have a percentage by chance?
Right now it's 7.8% of our cases, but over the year it's been hovering at about 10%, and that's up from 0% in the last few years. This came on the radar like gangbusters, and now it's here to stay.
These cases were pretty much non-existent before the George Floyd murder in May 2022. And that created an explosion. 2020, excuse me. And that created an explosion in these cases where we're seeing all these universities impose these really vague requirements on faculty hiring, promotion, and tenure, their livelihoods, based on the commitment to DEI. And these terms are not very well defined. And faculty come to FIRE saying, hey, I'm discriminating against based on my views. How do I help myself and help preserve this campus for free expression?
And we should be really clear that FIRE takes no position on, just like anything, we don't, if we're defending someone with certain political views, that doesn't mean we agree with those views. We don't say that DEI is good or bad, or frequently they're not defined, so we can't really say one way or the other, but all we're saying is that faculty have the academic freedom and the expressive right to not be compelled to state that they have views they don't have, or to change their syllabi, or to say that they love DEI so that they can get promoted or get tenure.
So, I mean, is the issue that they function essentially as political litmus tests?
Exactly.
Then? I mean, these issues, DEI issues, tend to rate toward one side of the political spectrum, right? Like, I remember you mentioned the George Floyd protest. After those protests, a lot of college campuses started creating these anti-racism committees, right? Anti-racism is an ideology. It takes a certain perspective on how racism functions in society. And out of that came a lot of these recommendations for including diversity, equity, and inclusion in tenure and promotion and hiring processes. So there are a lot of faculty, there are a lot of people in America who disagree with the ideas surrounding anti-racism. These ideas motivate DEI, and they're using these essentially as a screen, right, for certain faculty. I mean, that's how they function.
Are. Yeah, and this is not a new issue. We're talking about going back to the 1960s, right, where there were bans on faculty belonging to any organization that advocates for the overthrow of the U.S. government, that are treasonous, that are seditious, and targeted towards communists, obviously, after the Second Red Scare. And so this whole issue of universities having this litmus test for faculty is really not a new one. And we're seeing kind of DEI being like the soup du jour of the day, right? The newest issue that's being advocated for and censored and whatnot. And so we have these faculty members who are just trying to get into the university, trying to have their ideas and become members of the academic community, but unable to do so because of their political views.
But faculty, all right, so you teach students, right? And you need to make sure you have an inclusive environment in your classroom. You care about diversity and perhaps in all of its permutations. Are these things that universities shouldn't care about in hiring?
They absolutely should. I think universities should care about faculty being competent in their subject matter, treating students with respect, not discriminating against them based on their viewpoints or their race, ethnicity, stuff like that. But we're really talking about universities conforming to administrators' views on what the correct political viewpoint should be. And a lot of these hiring committees of faculty are actually administrators, they're not faculty. They're people that don't really have a subject matter expertise in what they're trying to hire for. And that creates this orthodoxy in the university where you have administrators imposing their viewpoints on incoming faculty.
Well, equity, perhaps of those three categories is the most ideologically loaded, right? It's different from equality. Let's treat everyone similarly. It says, well, certain people are disadvantaged, right? And they need to get preference or additional resources to kind of level the playing field. And that's, whether you agree with that argument or not, it is a controversial argument, and how it should be applied it is something that's a matter for debate. So, but you see these being motivated by anti-racism, which places a great emphasis on equity. You can see how this could, to quote the Supreme Court, cast a pall of orthodoxy on campus. And if this is just me thinking aloud here, if you were trying to create orthodoxy on campus, if you were trying to remove a certain viewpoint from the professoriate, I can't really think of a better way to do it
than saying only people who agree with us get in the door.
Yeah, because hiring, as we know from all the bias studies that have been done throughout history, discriminatory hiring based on race, on sex, hiring can be a black box. You don't know why someone doesn't get hired. So you require these diversity, equity, and inclusion statements, which, you can pretty accurately predict someone's political beliefs, perhaps, if they respond honestly to those statements. And so, you see the statement that perhaps is coming from the conservative or the libertarian or the DEI skeptic, and you can just toss that one out the door without ever having a paper trail or ever having to justify why you did it, right?
That's really troubling.
But at the same time, universities can hire for a holistic criteria of issues, and so there's often another justification you can make for why this person didn't get hired. So, and universities have sort of the freedom to make those sorts of hiring choices, so long as it's not for a discriminatory reason, which, as we know, is hard. So you can't just outright ban the requirement or the option for these universities to administer DI statements either, because that would itself perhaps be unconstitutional.
Yeah, it's really tricky here because you're right, hiring is a black box. Universities do have their own free speech rights to determine their associations, figure out who they want to bring in the university, who to hire, which students to admit, stuff like that. But when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're seeing these issues being tinged towards the traditional, I guess, is progressive views about race, ethnicity, background, stuff like that. Bowling Green's a perfect example of this, where in their rubric they have for DEI, they say that the faculty member actually gets marked down for speaking about diversity only in terms of different perspectives or areas of study, but do not discuss identity. So it's a really powerful movement here about diversity, not in terms of ideology, but in terms of your background, your ethnicity, and your race.
Yeah, you can't say I'm contributing to diversity because I'm a conservative and there's not very many conservatives on this campus.
Yeah,
that doesn't count.
There's no Trump supporters here, therefore I am a diverse political candidate.
Yeah, they're like,
fly.
not that kind of diversity. We mean a very specific thing.
Which is interesting because when you talk about people from different backgrounds, racial backgrounds, different sexes, different sexual orientations, you talk about the diversity and the value that comes from that because they have different perspectives on things, right? They have different life experiences. But you say that viewpoint diversity, which is born out of kind of those personal characteristics sometimes, isn't valuable. And I'm glad you bring that up, Zach, because FIRE has a research team. And prior to this podcast, I reached out to them to see what sort of research they have. And breaking some news on this podcast, Nathan Honeycutt, who's a new addition to the research team here at FIRE, has done some extensive research on diversity, equity, inclusion statements and how they are used within kind of the faculty hiring and promotion process. He did 7 different studies featuring 3,878 faculty participants at U.S. colleges and universities. And it found that faculty who wrote DEI statements that focused on viewpoint diversity were rated much lower than those who wrote statements that were based on sort of issues of race or gender. Yeah, he says the evaluation penalty was most severe toward DEI statements discussing viewpoint diversity, but was also of consequence for statements that focused on rural diversity and socioeconomic diversity. Treating the DEI statements, he writes, as an initial screening device, 51.6% of faculty who evaluated the viewpoint diversity statement recommended that the applicant not be advanced for further review. 35% would not advance the writer of the socioeconomic diversity statement, and 42% for the rural diversity statement. That's compared to 9 to 20% for the various egalitarian DEI statements. That is like the race and the gender issue. So, if you have faculty sitting on the committees reviewing these DEI statements, it's very clear from the research that faculty are going to rate people lower, as you say, for expressing interest in viewpoint diversity issues, which is probably going to rate more toward the conservative or libertarian side of this perspective. And,
they don't mean viewpoint diversity. they mean, is someone from, an underrepresented racial minority or an underrepresented, gender or sexuality. That's really what they're looking for, and that's what we're hearing from faculty.
But they don't say that.
They don't say that, and we are always looking for...
Because that would be essentially like a litmus test. We have this opinion about DEI, and do you agree with it?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you dissent from it, over half of your statements are going to get thrown out before it goes further into the review process.
Yeah, you can get a job here. You can't work at this university.
And who loses, is the students. I really think that students should be seeking out faculty who have views that are different from their own, or to engage in conversations around. I think every university administrator, if you said, what are the most important issues of our day, they would say stuff like race and class and gender identity, sexuality, and they are taking away students' opportunity to confront maybe faculty with different views in them, or faculty who would bring speakers to campus who have nuanced views or divergent views, and that helps students solidify their own views, even if they disagree with these faculty members or professors, and it also speakers, and it also helps students, understand that they can engage with these other viewpoints without fear. They can have these discussions, and it doesn't necessarily, we have a lot of talk about like what's harming students these days. They can have those discussions.
And it also creates an echo chamber among faculty, right? You have these faculty who all think the same exact way, and that creates a department, say your economics department or your philosophy department, that only has very narrow viewpoints on what should be a broad area of study. If you're a student in these departments trying to get your PhD, your master's, just want to get your major there, you may feel chilled in your expression of going out there and talking to faculty, having these broad ranging discussions that universities should be inspiring and should be encouraging. That won't be happening because of these very ideologically narrow and limited faculty.
Yeah, I mean, there are some colleges and universities that kind of build their departments around a certain perspective on the issues. You think University of Chicago with the Chicago School in Economics, or you think like George Mason, for example, and its libertarian perspective, not just on economics, but also law. The problem becomes, and that can be a problem too, especially if you believe in like sort of debate across lines of difference being a better way to kind of arrive at truth and understanding. But it becomes especially a problem when all the departments across the country, when most departments within the country have that same perspective. The University of Chicago School of Economics was, a minority perspective. George Mason is notable because it is a divergent perspective on some of these issues. You mentioned the Bowling Green issue. I also have here, you guys currently have letters out to San Diego State University on some of its required DEI statements. There's also the University of Illinois, my home state, has one as well. It's not going away.
Going away.
I mean, at the rate it's going, almost every college and university, I think, is going to adopt one of these sort of DEI statements. It's just a question of how bad it is, right? Like optional statements aren't as bad as required statements, but then optional statements can function in the same sort of screening way that required ones can, right? It's like if you don't submit the optional statement, you're probably going to get screened out fairly quickly.
And we do win some of these cases. Like Bowling Green, for example, we had a great conversation with the General Counsel of the university, and she agreed with us pretty much in full, and she offered to revise the statements to now allow ideological diversity for its faculty. And it says right there in the statement that says, if you apply to this school with your DEI statement, you will not be discriminated against based on your views. Which is great. Let's do that. So we hope that's the best we can do, right? Like you said, it's a black box. No one really knows how the sausage is made, but just having that statement on the application saying that your views will not be discriminated against, that goes a long way.
Yeah. I want to move now to talk about another trend in the campus world involving disinvitations, right? Zach, are you still the keeper of our disinvitation database?
I used to be. I passed it off to wonderful researchers, like you mentioned. We hire them now. They're great. They're doing a wonderful job.
Do we know where this year sits on kind of I didn't have a chance to look at the database before we jumped on here, but sort of sits on the trend line since we've started tracking?
Go ahead.
No, please.
We are up significantly this year. I was talking to Zach earlier about how, several years ago, for a long time it was at commencement time when we were watching disinvitations happen. Condoleezza Rice would get invited, and some students would say, we don't like her views on X, or Mr. Rogers, or I think the Dalai Lama. We've had all across.
And then the universities just stopped inviting anyone who was interesting to give their commencement addresses to make them as bland and boring as possible.
For the students, right? Like students want to hear the best speakers.
Exactly right.
Someone else.
And it was sort of the kind of thing where it was like, if you had any view that had ever been controversial, we're going to fight you on this speaker. Now, the disinvitations seem to be on an uptick even since last year. The year before, we were at 20, then 28. Now we're in the 30s because students are protesting predominantly conservative views on campus.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. I just read a blog post from James Jordan, who's in our litigation department, which is excellent. Let me see. Did I print it out? Yes, it does. He says, UC Davis feces flingers lose their shit over movie screening. A subhead is, as a public institution, the university cannot tolerate this crap. Long story short, on November 29th, several chapters of Sacramento area Turning Point USA student groups met on UC Davis's campus to watch a screening of the controversial documentary, What is a Woman? And then roughly 30 minutes into the screening,
The doors open.
The doors swung open. Two black-clad figures rushed in and then threw manure into the room. Yeah. And then I guess one of the student organizers tried to chase them, and then the black-clad ninja figures, I don't know, Antifa, whatever you want to call them, pepper sprayed them.
They did. They were prepared.
But clearly an effort to shut down the screening of this movie.
And there's certainly been, I mean, for me, that's been the most striking thing this year as we're closing out the year and we're looking back, is the uptick in an appetite for violence, like violent protests. We had the situation at Penn State. There's been some situations at the University of New Mexico this year. There was Cornell with Ann Coulter.
Dartmouth,
and a number of, so this is the kind of stuff that used to happen once a year or once every couple of years. We'd have a situation where like, oh no, someone's violently disrupting this speech or is physically attacking someone, and it was a huge deal. And now it was like once a month in the last,
every
maybe
week
even more,
almost,
every
a
week.
semester, a new case like this.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, so you were talking about kind of the harm or trauma justifications for censorship, or you at least made reference to it earlier, Alex. If you believe speech is violence, it makes you feel justified in using actual physical violence to stop that speech, right? I was struck at the November 9th Cornell University speech from Ann Coulter, who is an alumnus of Cornell University, and who had spoken at the school many times before, I think 2 or 3 times before. It is Cornell University,
Yeah,
right? It's not college.
Yeah.
I always sometimes confuse this.
There is a Cornell College, but that's a different one.
Yeah, right? And Zach, you did a great TikTok video where you broke down kind of the disruptions that were happening at Cornell. And to Cornell's credit, they had police on hand.
They did.
And when student disruptors stood up and tried to shout down the event, the police came in, tried to remove those disruptors. But then, as soon as one was removed, another one would stand up, try and shout it down. And then another one after that person was removed. It's like, how long can you play whack-a-mole?
Yeah, it was coordinated by the disruptors.
Yeah.
It was like the disruptors would get up there, scream and shout, be warned by the administrators. Police would come in, escort them, disrupt the event. Another one would come up right after that for like 10, 20 minutes or so.
And the reason I bring this up in the context of violence is because one of the student protesters said, when they stood up to shout down the event, "We don't want you here, your words are violence," right? Yeah. Now, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any physical violence was actually used.
That's
here.
correct.
I mean, they were trying to muscle the event from going forward, but not by attacking someone, not violent. It's just sort of kind of like mob tactics in order to
just
shut
to
down
shout down, essentially.
Yeah, but at Penn State, and they were successful. After 30 minutes, Ann Coulter just gave up and left the stage. And I think Cornell's administration did issue a kind of statement lamenting what was happening. There was going to be student disciplinary charges against the students who were involved.
They did, which is the right thing to do.
Yeah, and of course, we always encourage students to protest peacefully. If they disagree with Ann Coulter, they can protest outside, they can write op-eds, they can engage with her during the Q&A, but you can't be censoring her. That is not free speech.
Yeah, well, at Penn State, we did have some, background here. October 24th, Gavin McInnes, who's one of the founders of Proud Boys, also a founder of Vice News, if I'm not mistaken, was set to speak at Penn State alongside a comedian, Alex Stein. It was billed as a comedy event. Both of them are controversial figures. Penn State kind of knew this would be a controversial event. There were going to be protests. There were some demands that the event be shut down. They learned this rodeo previously. I think Milo Yiannopoulos previously spoke at school. But outside of the event, as it's about to occur, Alex Stein comes out and kind of heckles some of the protesters. And then there were 2 or 3 isolated incidents of violence. I think Alex Stein got spit on. There was also a pepper spray incident. And the university essentially jumped at this as an opportunity to say, oh no, this speech is going to result in violence, we have to shut it down, right? And for our listeners who kind of aren't familiar with the First Amendment world, to the extent that the government can't prevent violence from occurring and use less restrictive means than shutting down the event, they can shut down some of these events, but they need to take every effort possible to not create that burden on the exercise of First Amendment rights before they go to that extreme and final step.
And we can see on video they didn't. You can see in the pepper spray incident there are literally 2 armed police officers that just stand there and watch. They don't.
I know.
What's the point of calling out the cavalry if you
literally they're sitting on horses?
Literally, many of them were sitting on horses watching. Alex Stein get spat on or whatever. And Penn State has a multi-billion-dollar endowment. So
huge police force.
They cannot tell, and they were there, but they just didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And Penn has been, going tit for tat with us about we did the best we could, and but like I said, we've got it on video.
I worked with Aaron and Chris, who are standing behind the cameras here right now, on a documentary about the ACLU's defense of the free speech rights when they wanted to rally, neo-Nazis wanted to rally in Skokie, Illinois, home to 6,000 Holocaust survivors. I saw what the police can and should do to prevent violence from occurring in probably one of the most hot-button, hostile environments possible. You've got Gavin McInnes, you got Alex Stein, you got people spitting on each other. The police can handle.
They can handle it
if they want to handle that. But they clearly were looking for any justification to shut down the event. And violence is usually the best crutch that they can lean on if they want to. And so they find these, a little bit of spittle on Alex Stein, and I don't begrudge that either, especially in our era of coronavirus, right?
It's
where we're
true.
very concerned about germs. Or pepper spray to just say, you know what, we're First Amendment be damned, the right to free expression in America be damned. And they teach the wrong lesson.
They do.
To would-be censors. That, spray a little pepper spray, spit a little, and you can get an event shut down. Right?
And it was very interesting too, because I think the spitter was sort of on the side of many of the protesters against the event, whereas the pepper sprayer, allegedly, we couldn't really tell, maybe was affiliated with a Proud Boys situation. We don't know. But what was really interesting is by shutting down this event, they also shut down the protest. So it wasn't just Alex Stein and his brethren, Gavin McInnes, who lost here. It was also the students who came out to protest. They weren't allowed to continue talking about why they disagree with that event. So it was, it's not just us saying, oh, the show should have gone on. The protest should have gone on too.
Yeah, there are people there that want to listen to the speakers talk. They want to get out there and protest. And Penn State, with taxpayer money, says, no, not going to do either of these things. We can't protect the people. We can't allow the speech to go on. We're going to shut down this entire thing and ruin the party for everybody. And that's not okay. It's not what the First Amendment provides. It's not what the law provides.
Well, I think, Alex, did you write our letter to Penn State on this?
I think so. Sure. Like I said, we've written 200 letters this year.
I think you did, you and Graham.
That's right. That's right. Yes, I did.
Well, the letter, I think, kind of encapsulates our sentiments well. It says, students will walk away from Monday night with a message about what it means to express themselves on Penn State's campus. The students who peacefully protest risk being assaulted while police stand by and watch, and that those who threaten violence have ultimate control over which ideas are allowed at Penn State. Sort of the moral hazard argument. The behavior that gets rewarded gets repeated.
Absolutely.
And at Penn State, the behavior that gets rewarded, if you want the event to be shut down, is to use violence or to use mob-like tactics in order to shut down the event. And that's exactly what happened. I want to turn next to Emerson College. Long in the news, long been a pain in the side of fire, long been a cause for concern. What's happening at Emerson?
15 months now, by the way, it has been.
Alex hasn't been counting. She's needed to get extra pages for her calendar.
Well, we always want to, at the end of the year, we look and try to close out these cases and we go, God, is Emerson still going on? They do not like TPUSA at Emerson, the student group TPUSA, Turning Point USA. It all started last year when these students Fire news desk readers will remember that these were the students who passed out the China kind of sus stickers as a sort of Among Us reference to criticize the Chinese government and what TPUSA says are oppressive tactics, etc. This caused a massive controversy because many students said it was, they...
Not just students. The Emerson, William P. Gilligan, the president of Emerson College, sent out a community-wide email in which he accused the student group of anti-Asian bigotry and hate for these China kind of sus stickers.
And this was on the heels of COVID, where there had been, nationwide, there's sort of this uptick in anti-Asian, sentiment or hate crimes or whatever. And I think this was just a complete overreaction to stupid stickers.
Yeah, and the vice president of the group, KJ Lynham, is herself Asian. So it's
it makes no sense at all.
No, it doesn't make any sense at all. It's like, I think they were trying to hold water for the Chinese government, or there were people on campus who tried to shoehorn, because they don't like TPUSA, shoehorn an argument, because nobody likes hate, nobody likes bias, to like cast this as sort of like anti-Chinese people, which by all accounts was not intended to do. But the university ultimately found the group violating Emerson's bias-related behavior policy, issued a formal warning, and the group is effectively shut down on campus because they can't find an advisor, and you need an advisor to be a registered student organization, to host events, to promote those events. So they essentially, the president here, made the group an outcast, put the thumb on the scale against the group, told everyone these people are bigots. Surprise, surprise, you can't find a faculty advisor now to sponsor you.
Yeah,
I was supposed to speak there in March, by the way, and was told by Sam Nevis, who's the president of the informal TPUSA group now, that they can't host the event anymore because they can't host it on campus, and they can't promote it because they're not a registered student organization.
They can't reserve rooms, they can't get funding, they can't function as a group on campus. And that's a shame because it's all over a sticker, right? One sticker said, China kinda sus. That's what it said. Obviously criticizing the Chinese Communist Party for their many abuses of human rights. And because of that, this group is efficiently disbanded on campus. They're not there anymore. They're gone, and TPUSA students trying to find a group to discuss conservative viewpoints have nowhere to go now because this group is gone.
No, they even tried to, in October, host a documentary screening that was a documentary put together by CBS News, kind of about their travails at Emerson. And they were prevented from doing that because the administrator, who's like required to approve these, prior review, prior restraints, we could have that whole discussion.
Yeah, it's a whole
other issue. Aside. But like the administrator alleged factual inaccuracies about the piece. So they're using the new fake news justification.
It's the fake news, right?
And this is CBS, this is not a super
news.
Right-wing publication or anything like that. So
I guarantee the 100 of the groups at Emerson are not going through this rigmarole of prior review before they host documentary to see if they're also factually accurate or not.
No, they're not. And the problem here is, right, for us, this is a school that promises free expression, but it's also a private university, so your legal options are limited. But IRDP, or well, I shouldn't say IRDP, that was the old name of the Campus Rights Advocacy Department, Individual Rights Defense Program, before we expanded our mission.
Now we defend lots of different kinds of individuals off campus and on, and so now we have.
But one of the tools in your toolbox is to file a creditor complaint, right? Because accreditors have requirements for schools they accredit that they protect free speech and academic freedom rights. So, and concerned citizens can file complaints when universities do not live up to those promises. So what happened there?
Well, we are concerned citizens. Well, first I want to outline what Campus Rights Advocacy, formerly IRDP, for the last 15 months, we have been trying to work this out with Emerson. We have been trying to get them to see reason. We've written multiple letters. We've said, look, here, your policies are incredibly clear. Here, step by step, is how you violated them. When that didn't work, we did like a guerrilla marketing campaign on the streets of Boston. I was going to say
the Emerson kind of sus truck.
We did the Emerson.
They hated that. They hated that. Like
great.
The student newspaper keeps asking us if we're going to bring the truck back.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who don't know, and Aaron, maybe you could cut in a picture of the truck for folks viewing this on YouTube. We decided after Emerson wouldn't back down to park a big LED billboard truck in front of the administration building that says Emerson kind of sus, and encouraged people to
text a number to get more information. It would take them to our website. We had emersonkindasus.com or something like that.
Marketing stunts are not dead.
Bringing them back. We bought ads on the Boston Tea.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
They hated that, but they still haven't backed down. So
when schools don't listen to fire, we don't give up. So as one of our more extreme measures that we sometimes take when schools, particularly private schools, are not listening to us and we can't, we don't sue them, we just let their accreditor know that this institution is not meeting the standards for, like in this case, the New England Commission on Higher Education requires that colleges like Emerson provide free speech, basically. And so we're saying, look, here are these students trying to engage in free speech. We've got 15 months worth of evidence that this isn't happening. They're clearly engaging in viewpoint discrimination against these students. We need you to take action. And just earlier this week, we heard from the commission that they are indeed investigating. So accreditation has to mean something.
Yeah.
When students choose Emerson over, Bumble Munch College or whatever that's not accredited, they see these standards and say, okay, this is a school that's going to provide me with a meaningful education. And so accreditors have to enforce these standards.
It's a matter of institutional integrity, right? Like they have these policies. Emerson says in his policies, if you come here, matriculate here, we will give you free speech. We will provide you First Amendment rights consistent with, a public school. It's like if you go to school and you pay tuition and they don't give any classes. You go to the dining hall, you pay for your apple, they don't give any food. It's like you have to walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to universities. And so, really happy to say, submit our complaint. The accreditation body is doing something. They're investigating. Hopefully, we'll see. And if we are lucky or if we're fortunate, the accreditation body will say, hey, Emerson, like your policies say this, please do this. Deliver on what you promised to your students.
Yeah, truth in advertising.
And we also told the Board of Trustees, too, in case they weren't aware, in case they didn't see the truck going by.
Didn't see the truck, maybe.
We want to make sure.
Well, one of the things you find, and I know there was a time where we often did send our letters to boards of trustees, and we did that here in Emerson, but often the boards don't actually know the day-to-day workings at these colleges, and also are sometimes more ideologically diverse than the administrations at some of these colleges, and are, in fact, the governing body of these colleges and universities. So sometimes letting them know is a worthwhile enterprise because that you can sometimes spur action there in a way you can't with the administration. But just kind of as a final note before we sign off on the Emerson stuff, we are seeing crackdowns on speakers who are criticizing the Chinese government, not just at Emerson. Like here, you have the administration do it. But we had 2 issues at George Washington University this year where students were trying to, presumably students in some cases, were trying to post anti-CCP, anti-Chinese Communist Party flyers around campus. In the first case, to kind of protest human rights abuses surrounding the Beijing Olympics. And most recently, just kind of general protests of human rights abuses in China. In the first case, the
president is like, we're going to find out who did this. And we're like, what? You're trying to unmask these anonymous speakers? Are you like...
Well, it's dangerous, too, because criticism of the CCP, if you're a Chinese national, is illegal and can result in serious punishment, not just for you, but also for your family.
Your friends, your family, everyone you know.
So the president of George Washington, and to his credit, he realized very quickly that this was a stupid fucking idea and backed down. But he's initially said he was going to, to the students complaining, that he was going to investigate and try and unmask the students that were posting these Chinese protest flyers of the Chinese government. And I think something like that happened recently, where flyers critical of the Chinese Communist Party were torn down across GW's campus. I believe Fire wrote a letter that said, we need to do more to protect free expression at GW.
Yeah, the silence is deafening here. I mean, this guy is, the first thing, he's sitting in his office in D.C., capital of the United States of America, saying that these students cannot criticize the Chinese Communist Party, which is egregious, right? This is America, for Christ's sakes.
It just goes to show just how scared administrators are whenever of this kind of controversy. Like whenever students complain about anything, administrators very frequently toss their common sense out the window and say I'm going to investigate, I'm going to make this right, whatever, without even considering what the hell is happening here? Let me take a look. Let me be the adult in the room. Certainly when there is discrimination, when there's harassment, those policies are already on the books at all these schools. If actual discrimination, if actual harassment is happening, administrations should take action against that. But it's these squishy, someone said something I didn't like and it made me feel this sort of way, and then administrators are saying I'm going to launch a full-scale investigation. It's that kind of stuff that is coming up for us a lot these days, and certainly in the China situation, it just underscores the consequences are so much higher in that case.
It's very benign. Like Emerson, you have stickers, right, of a cartoon. And then in George Washington, you have posters, which are mostly in Chinese, which the president came and read, about human rights abuses. So it's like, we're not even talking about like conduct here or speech, talking about just literal pamphlets and writing on a wall of the university saying this can't be allowed.
Yeah, core political speech. Did you guys see the story go across News Desk this morning? For our listeners, News Desk is kind of our internal news service where we monitor the issues happening on and off campus related to our mission. But Berklee College of Music, speaking of Boston, Berklee College of Music is in Boston. Apparently a student at that college was stalking and threatening someone, I don't know if it was a student, who was posting flyers critical of the CCP, allegedly told the student that they would chop off his hands if he kept posting the flyers. But more concerningly, perhaps, is the fact that this student who was charged with stalking reported, allegedly, this activity to the Chinese police service or the Chinese,
threatened his family, said the security service is going to be there to greet your family. Like, holy hell.
Yeah, all for posting flyers.
Oh my God.
But the Department of Justice, I think the district attorney for that area of Massachusetts arrested the student or charged the student with stalking. I believe Berklee College of Music suspended the student. But it just goes to show, the stakes are high when you're a foreign student who lives under authoritarian government at home. You have the full freedom to express yourself here in the United States, but doing so can risk retribution back home. And apparently China has eyes and ears here in the United States, willing to outsource that censorship so that it can occur here in the United States too. Very scary stuff.
And the great part about these flyers is that they're posted anonymously, which obviously is because of the retribution they can face back home. And so these efforts by administrators and by, I guess, private individuals to unmask these protesters are really detrimental to free speech.
Yeah.
The students' rights.
Anonymous speech is protected speech, and the China situation goes to show how important it can be when you are facing threats from governments that don't have a First Amendment.
Yeah. I want to turn now kind of for the final topic of our conversation to Tennessee Tech.
Hey.
Zach, you recently wrote a blog post about a court decision relating to three professors, two professors on one side of the issue, one professor on the other side of the issue there, that kind of turned the concept of freedom of expression, freedom of speech on its head. Can you talk a little bit about that case?
Sure. Just baseline Tennessee Tech, right? Public school, bound by the First Amendment, bound by state law to not punish speech that may be, I think it's offensive, unwise, uncivil, and of course by their old policies to not do this. And so despite all of these, commitment to free speech, they have punished two professors for posting a parody Game of Thrones flyer of another professor sitting on the Iron Throne, criticizing the professor for his, other side of the issue, for advising the TPUSA chapter, bringing it full circle here.
And this is also the person they're criticizing is not just a professor, they're a local county commissioner as well.
It's
so
true.
A politician of sorts.
Local dog catcher, yeah, some low-level position. And so fire was unsuccessful. We were not able to get the punishment rescinded, so they got an attorney and they sued, and the federal district court, the faculty sued.
Yeah.
And the federal district court said that it was the flyer that really violated people's free speech rights, not the punishment of the professors for the flyer. That the flyer itself cut against the free exchange of ideas on campus because they called this professor and this local government figure a racist.
Yeah.
The court was wrong here. I think we could say definitively,
it was so
with all
bizarre.
due respect to the judiciary, this is a terrible decision.
It's the first time
They
I've
said
ever
you didn't
seen-
censor this guy enough, and that harmed free speech on campus.
Should have censored him more. That would have been a better thing for free speech on campus.
Our collective jaws were sort of like dropped when that decision came out.
Professors as government employees have the right to speak as private citizens, as a public concern, like posting flyers criticizing government figures for being racist, very much in the free speech rights. University said, no, you can't do this, not okay. You deserve the punishment. The university was reasonable in punishing them because they had this free speech policy that protects civil uncivil and offensive speech.
And we do often see, we talked before about sort of these squishy bias policies that administrators can abuse to say, oh, that's bias, oh, that's bias, that's bias. Same with incivility or respectability policies, where they can sort of call anything they don't like uncivil and say, oh, you violated our incivility policy. Oh, you disagree with me? Incivility policy violation. So
my favorite part was the court was like, what is the harm here that the university is trying to show here? And the court was saying that the group professor was so harmed, he went on Fox News the next day and said how harmed he was. He said he felt so threatened, he went on national cable TV and said, look how threatened I am. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem to be a good justification to override someone's core political speech rights. But I'm not a federal judge, so.
Do we know if the professors are going to appeal or not?
Yes, they're trying to appeal.
Yes. All right, good.
You'd have to imagine that, at the appellate level, a plurality of judges reasonable heads will prevail on this
Hopefully. Yeah.
Right?
Crazy case.
Yeah, you almost have to appeal. You can't let that stand. This also, we talked early in the podcast about TPUSA at Emerson. We talked about TPUSA right at Penn State,
Yeah.
That was TPUSA at Penn State, right? Was hosting that
Well,
event?
at Penn State it was like Gavin. I know it was Gavin McGinnis. I don't know. Was it TPUSA that was
All
hosting?
cases are TPUSA.
All of our cases are TPUSA,
All
except for the
205
drag
letters
show we're
TPUSA.
going to talk about.
The drag show is not TPUSA.
It's not always just.
But in one case, we're defending the rights of TPUSA and their express rights. In the other case, we're defending the right for people to criticize TPUSA.
See, we're nonpartisan. I'm going to get it tattooed on my forehead. At Fire, we're nonpartisan. Talk to me about how nonpartisan we are.
But there's another issue at Tennessee Tech, right?
Yes.
There is. Somehow worse than the first issue.
Yeah.
But not involving TPUSA.
So in August, a local LGBTQ rights advocacy organization partnered with two student organizations to host a drag show at Tennessee Technological University's Backdoor Playhouse. Never mind. I was like, is this is that its actual name?
No, this is legit, yeah.
No comment on that one.
Yeah,
we have not done the factual.
There's very creative student groups here, very creative.
Anyway, they hosted this, and there was a video that was taken at the drag show, spliced together, featuring a performer on stage. I guess children were there giving this performer fake or real money, I don't know. Offended the sensibilities of some in the community, but this was a voluntary event. Presumably the children didn't get there on their own. Their parents brought them. We have the right to associate around whatever sort of events or interests we have. Nevertheless, the president punished the student group for hosting this. They can host no more events. They said that the president said they were disturbed and dismayed by the drag show and later claimed it didn't represent Tennessee Tech's values. The ban on the groups hosting campus events remains in effect. Violations of free speech are an upholding of decency in America.
Yeah, right? This is the classic case of an administrator, because he is personally offended by the groups, is punishing them by now allowing them to host any campus events the entire semester, including through the next semester. And so think about it. You have an administrator saying he's offended because the group was disparaging and mocked any religious group, right? What century is this? that student groups can't mock religious groups, right, on campus. Think about the larger issue here, right? There is like 1,000 student groups in any university, and they're all opposed to each other. You have the Catholics, the atheists, the meat eaters, you have the vegans, you have the Democrats or Republicans, right? Imagine that the groups could not exist on campus because they offended one administrator. There'd be no student groups left on campus, especially nowadays with the LGBT Alliance here hosting drag shows, which is very common.
Yeah, I mean, like, what are your values? Are you taking issue positions on this stuff? Anyway, two big issues at Tennessee Tech. Let's just say Tennessee Tech is not knocking the free speech ball out of the free speech ballpark. Definitely a contender for our worst colleges for free speech that we will, I'm assuming, sit down to discuss in January.
Yeah, we can't wait to continue to signal
Emerson
boost
is
all the
probably
speech that Tennessee Tech and Emerson tried to censor. We love to continue. When schools try to censor whatever group it is, whatever viewpoint, I always get real excited for being able to signal boost the speech that they were trying to censor.
Oh yeah, I like that, the free speech blues. Aaron behind the camera here is a guitar player. Maybe we can get him to kind of actually come in front of the camera and do the free speech blues. He did a rendition of John Denver's.
Yeah, I saw that
one. What's the name of that song, Aaron? The John Country Roads. Yeah, about speech codes in West Virginia, which is fantastic, and is I think on our YouTube channel, right, Aaron?
Very talented musician cheered fire.
We're nonpartisan. We're multi-talented. Come to us for all your free speech.
We were talking about putting together a band because John Merigliano, our web developer, is a drummer. Drummer, I think. Well, we do have a bassist, Jack Witten, who runs our news desk, is a bass player.
Yeah, and I played cello in 5th grade. You know, I'm right there.
Yeah. Very cool.
I will watch. I have no talent and will watch.
I play guitar, so I could. Aaron can play lead. I can play rhythm. I was in a Swedish death metal band for many years.
Swedish death metal.
Fun
fact.
I
forgot about your Swedish death metal obsession.
Yeah, we had a record deal. It's a throwback. How things changed. All right. Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Out of time. Zach, Alex, I appreciate you guys coming on the show to discuss the campus work this year. And for those of you who are listening, don't forget my note at the beginning. Again, speech is free, but protecting it here at Fire is not. We don't live on love. We depend on your support and your donations to ensure that this free speech playhouse keeps rocking. This podcast is hosted and produced by me, Nico Perino, and recorded and edited by my colleague Aaron Reese. We also have Chris Maltby behind the camera as well. To learn more about So to Speak, you can follow us on Twitter or Instagram by searching for the handle Free Speech Talk. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/So to Speak podcast. We also post full video versions of the episodes to So to Speak's YouTube channel, and we post segments or clips to Fire's YouTube channel. So check those out if you want to see video versions of the podcast, if you're listening on a podcast player. If you have feedback, we take listener feedback at sotospeakatthefire.org. We also like reviews. More reviews we get, the more Apple Podcasts or Google Play feed this podcast to more potential listeners as they're exploring for new podcasts to listen. And until next time, I wish you all happy holidays, happy new year, and we'll talk to you in 2023.